Some stories teach us how to lead, some teach us how to persevere, and then there are stories that do both at the same time. Today's guest has lived through pressure, loss, rebuilding, and renewal, and his journey proves that God can turn even the most unexpected detours into purpose. Welcome to Unmasked, where we take off the filters and get real about faith, failure, and finding freedom. I'm your host, Wesley Farnsworth, a dad, veteran, author, and a man who's learned that God does his best work in the middle of our mess. Each episode will have honest conversations with people who've walked through addiction, pain, or doubt, and with leaders, pastors, and everyday believers who are learning to live and lead authentically. So take a breath, pull up a chair, and let's get real. This is Unmasked. Today on Unmasked, I'm joined by Scott, a Navy veteran, entrepreneur, and founder of a national construction staffing and consulting firm that supports high-stakes federal projects across the country. Scott built his company from the ground up, applying military discipline, biblical values, and commitment to excellence that has shaped ACE into a mission-driven organization that tithes 10% of its profits to charity. But his story goes much deeper than business. Nearly 20 years ago, a motorcycle accident left Scott without his left leg and sent him into a long season of wrestling with faith, identity, and God's purpose. Today, he lives with a profound awareness that every victory, every open door, and every ounce of strength is evidence of God's grace, and he uses his experience to guide leaders, serve others, and pour back into those that are walking through difficulty. Scott, thank you so much for joining us and being willing to share and get real about the journey behind the platform.
Good morning, Wesley. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm so happy to have you here on Unmasked with us and to share your story. So without further ado, let's just jump into it and share your story and the things that you've been through with my Unmasked audience.
Well, I guess the best place to start is, I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You ever been to Albuquerque, West?
I've never been to New Mexico. Nope.
Well, good. Don't ever go. I'm just that's for all your fans from New Mexico. I apologize, but I grew up there, and it's the desert, and I grew up in a small town, and two brothers and two sisters. And um, when I got to the point where I was going to, rolling into my senior year, I had some family situations. So I ultimately decided to drop out of high school and join the Navy. So I was kind of a mess. And so the Navy kind of shaped me up quite a bit. And so I joined the Navy, and it fit me well because I'm a little OCD, so it really fit me well to be able to make my bed and do the things that were necessary. um, and then about my 8-year mark, me and my wife, we got married, and I got married at 21. We had 4 kids by the time we were 26 ish. Um, and then about 8 years in the Navy, I was celebrating my advancement to Chief Petty Officer, and I was following my wife on my motorcycle, and lady came across the center line and hit me head on. So she hit the foot of my peg, where my foot was on the peg of the motorcycle, with the front of her car, crushed my foot, sent me flying, landed fairly close to a fire hydrant, which could have killed me. Was laying there dying on the side of the road, bleeding to death, and some army medic just happened to stop by. Former army medic who wasn't actually in the Navy. He was a military police, and she actually happened to just be driving by and saw me laying on the road. Had tourniquet so I didn't bleed out, and called 911. So fast forward, I was in the hospital at Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi, and all I remember is waking up and my wife saying, "They want to cut your leg off. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, do whatever you got to do to keep me in the Navy," and that was my primary focus. So they took took my foot that night. It took my leg about 3 days later. Went through Over the next 6 months, I went through 11 surgeries, mostly work on my left leg, where I lost it. below the knee. So I said, spent the next 11 months kind of recovering. And during that time is really where I founded my faith. Grew up Catholic, and I was actually an altar boy in high school, as much as I didn't deserve to be an altar boy because I was a sinful child. I had a faith there, but I didn't know how it fit into my life. And so one day I was really struggling because I was going through prescription drug addiction. I had taken Oxycontin for 9 months straight. So I was basically high the entire time. After I lost my leg, the pain was just incredible, you could imagine. And so I was feeling a lot of pain, and I decided, you know what, I wanted to take my life. So I went to my garage, sat in my car, turned the car on, and I sat there for a minute, and I just felt like God talked to my heart, and He said, "Don't worry, I have this. You just need to get up every day and try as best as you possibly can." And I just something just moved me, and I don't know, I don't feel like it was an audible voice, but I feel like it was just, you know, something that God placed in my heart. And so I got out of the car, I went to the house, and from that point forward, I just try to wake up every day and let God take the wheel and be in control. And that had led to a lot of different incidents. I returned back to the Navy, ended up having to retire from the Navy because I got injured again. And then that's when I built U.S. embassies and started my own company during that time. That's a lot. That's a long story, but there's a lot has gone along in my life that has kind of tested my faith. In fact, my wife is going in this week to deal with cancer again because she had breast cancer 10 years ago, and she had it all removed, and they found another spot. But hopefully, we caught it soon enough. It seems like everything is going to be fine. But between my wife's cancer, me dealing with prescription drug addiction, me losing my leg. We've been through a lot of trial, have raising 4 children. We've been through trials and tribulations, and we'll be married next year for 30 years. It's been a one heck of a ride. Not what I thought my life was going to be, for sure, but it's better and it's more fulfilling because of God's intervention.
And you have been through a lot. And first and foremost, thank you for your service. And being a father of 4 kids myself, I can understand some of that side of the things. And for 30 years, congrats on that as well. You've mentioned your accident, and now with your wife's cancer and just everything that you've been through. And you mentioned, I don't remember if you mentioned it now or when we were talking and exchanging messages prior, but you mentioned wrestling with God. And so what did that struggle look like for you? How did faith really begin to shape in the aftermath of everything that happened?
Well, you go through all the stages because they say when you go through something like that, you go through the stages of dealing with death, right? So, and one of the stages, it got to is where one of the first ones was anger. I was really mad at God, and I was like, why me? You know, why did this brief moment in my life define the rest of my life? And so I was just kind of honest with him, and that was tough because I mean, as much as I think people have this perception of Jesus being this hippie with sandals walking around, um, you know, and I was afraid kind of to tick him off a little bit. I hate to say it, but but I didn't know what else to do because I needed help in one way, shape, or form, and so I was just honest with him about that. And he, I feel like I had to be tore down just, in order for me to be able to live the rest of my life the way I have, because um, as difficult as it has been, it's been extremely rewarding in that way. And it's funny how God can take something so horrible and make it so good. And that's really defined my life. And I always say when you go through difficult times, it really tests who you are. And what I figured out is I'm a weak, flawed man that needs Jesus. And although I never want my children to go through what I have gone through, I do want my children to have a faith like I have developed through trials and tribulations.
Yeah, we're all flawed and we're all weak. And that's why we need Jesus in our lives. Because, man, I don't know where I'd be in my life without him. Um, and so, and I love that you brought up your kids and the fact that you don't want them to go through what you've gone through, but you still want them to be able to have a faith like yours. And it's something that I think every parent wants and strives for. But no parent wants them to have to go through the hardships that we've had to go through. And so when you look back at your life, when you look back at all the things that you've gone through, is there a specific moment that stands out where faith became more than something that you believed and became something that you really depended on?
It's funny how like running a business can really test your commitment to God. And I didn't say probably one of the biggest ones. I mean, there's been several in my life, but probably one of the biggest ones is, and I love telling this story because it just shows God's grace and God's goodness, is we had started the company and I wanted to do it to where I had built it based on principles, some basic principles, Christian principles, like doing the right thing. And so because I'm a private company, I can choose to do that or not. So that's what I did. And I got to a point where I was making pretty good money. I had been in it for a few years, and I just felt like this calling. I felt almost selfish, because I had more than the average person, definitely more than I deserve, but more than the average person had. And so I just felt like Jesus said, you need to do more. So that's when we decided to tie 10%, and it was in November, I remember. And that and I said, I told my wife my feelings and my commitment to it, and my wife's like, absolutely, I think that we should do it. And so we started tithing, and the first month we tithed, I had the busiest month I've ever had in the history of my company. So, and I looked about halfway through the month, I looked at my wife and I said, do you think that Jesus would slow it down if I only gave 5%? And so, oh, I said, no, it doesn't work that way. But that was one of the things. It was kind of like he was waiting for me to put my faith in him. As soon as I put my faith in him, he opened the floodgates. And I've seen that several different times in my business and in my life. It's like, you know what? He lays this out, and you got to be willing to take that step, And thank God I took that step. And it gets harder and harder because we have this concept of comfort, you know? We want to be comfortable, but God's not concerned about our comfort. He's worried about our character. And in order to in order to learn from those things, you have to go through them. So,
Yeah.
you mentioned failure at the very beginning. I heard Michael Jordan once say that he's failed more than he's succeeded. And that's the story of my life. It just happens that I didn't give up. And the reason I didn't give up is because I felt like, God is in my corner, and what is going to be is what's going to be. So,
Yeah. Failure is just another step forward. And that's the way I look at it is, and that's one of the things on this show that we talk about is, failures are going to happen. Things are going to happen in your life that you can either choose to let define you or you can choose to learn from it and continue moving forward. And that's why we talk about the fact that you're not defined by the things that you've done. You're not defined by the things that have happened to you, the way you were brought up. None of that defines you. You're only defined by who you say you are. More importantly, who God says you are. Um, and so I love that you're not letting those failures define who you are. You're not letting the accident define who you are and the things that you've gone through. And so you mentioned your company, Ace. You built Ace on humility, or with humility, integrity, and service at the core. Values that aren't always celebrated, especially in a high pressure industry. How do you practically lead with faith in an environment that demands pressure and deadlines and precisions and things like that?
well, it's fun. It's funny you mention that because that's one of the things that was important to me. Construction, you're absolutely correct. Construction is probably one of the most unethical industries out there. In fact, the accrediting body for construction management requires that part of the curriculum, 5 classes part of the curriculum, has to be taught on ethics. And there's a reason for that, is because people are extremely unethical. So I just, I had seen it first place, had worked for different companies, different owners, and I had seen that kind of behavior take place. And it honestly, it was extremely disturbing and it bothered me so bad. I just felt like I needed to do something different. And so when I thought, well, how was the best way to lead? The military teaches you one way to lead, the civilian world teaches another way to lead, being a CEO teaches a way to lead. Everybody has these different ways, right? But then I thought to myself, well, who should I model my leadership after? And I thought, well, no person better than Jesus Christ. I mean, he was a servant leader. And so that's something I try to preach and something I try to practice, is where we openly communicate our failures and we're honest about what occurs in our business. And I always say it's not exactly what you do, it is to a certain degree, but it's how you do it. So I unfortunately have had the experience of having to lay off and fire people, or people quit, or people steal from me, or there's been numerous different things happen. But as my wife says all the time, I can't control their behavior, you know? But what I can do is I can control the way I react to it. And the best way to overcome evil is with good. And if you look at Jesus' life, that's exactly what he did, And I think of the coin, where he picked up the coin and says, "Give unto Caesar what's Caesar's, give unto God what's God." A lot of people don't realize that, but that could have got him killed at that point, because he basically separated, Caesar from God, you know. And I try to take that little fearless nature that Jesus Christ taught and kind of try to take into my business, because this is we're all going to die. It doesn't matter how much you accumulate in your life. It's how you go about your life that's very important. So, and numerous different situations, like we have an attrition bonus. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but we pay people if they come to work for us after they've been there for a period of time. I think it's 6 or 9 months. If they quit, we will give them a $5,000 check. And the reason we do that is we got a good thing going. And if $5,000 means the difference between being here or not, if it's really all about that, then time for you to go find something different. We've had to, fire or lay off people. How do you go about that? Well, the way I've navigated that is, number one, I set them up on a good footnotes to be able to find another job. It's not necessarily my responsibility as a business person, but it's my responsibility as a Christian to go and take it a step further. So I've helped numerous different employees, whether they quit or we fired them, find another job. Also, give them enough money and give them benefits long enough to be able to make them transition. And I hate to say it, but we've had to part ways with a few people recently, and it's tough because you got Christmas here. So what do? You don't want to lay somebody off near Christmas. So the best thing you can do is, you know what, maybe give them a severance package, whether they deserve it or not. Give them a severance package to be able to carry them through December and January. Do we have an obligation to? Legally, no. Morally, absolutely, because it's just money. You know, it really is just money, and when you let it go, it has a way of, freeing God's will up a little bit. I hate to say it like that, but it's you give to get, with no expectation you're going to get.
Yeah, you mentioned there a difference between what you're legally operated or legally expected to do and looking at things from a faith perspective. And I love that you give the severance packages and things like that to people, whether they deserve it or not, because having been in that, position where my position was eliminated and I
Mhm.
didn't get a severance package, it makes all the difference in the world. And so as a leader, how do you balance your faith versus the worldly perspective of, well, I don't have to legally do this, So let's not do it, or let's just do the bare minimum to make us look good.
Well, when you fully realize, and this is when I knew that I was really a follower of Jesus, when you put less importance upon the dollar bill and more important on looking yourself in the mirror in the morning and doing the right thing. And the way I keep myself honest, to be honest with you, is we have three core values at the company. It's do the right thing, have extreme urgency, and be the gold standard. Because I found when I open my business, that's all you have to do is just do the things that are right, be really good at what you do, and do it with extreme urgency. You're gonna be successful. Because people are looking for that in the world, especially when you do the right thing. We've had companies write us a check by accident for more money. And this has happened several times. And we send them to check back and say, I'm sorry, but you sent us too much money. And they're like, they don't know what to do, you know? But they're like, that's not expected. But when you turn that over to God, you realize it's his money anyhow. So 90% is a heck of a whole lot more than I deserve, you know? So that's why I think you're called upon to do a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's not about the act, it's about the faith that goes along with it. So that's it. And I hold myself accountable through those core values because everybody in my company knows, hey, this is what we're doing. So I can tell you, just like your children, if you're hypocritical, they will point it out. So so it kind of keeps me honest because every time somebody has to leave or something and I have to take the high road, I feel an obligation to because I ran my mouth and said we're a Christian organization and I have an obligation to. So I hate to say it, but it's reverse peer pressure I put upon myself, and but it's for God's glory. So who cares?
I like that. Many listeners feel stuck between failure and calling, between what happened to them and who they want to become. So, what have you learned about rebuilding identity after life deals you a blow that you never saw coming?
And some people may be familiar with this word, and I wasn't for years, but I didn't really understand it. And it was that concept of paradigm. You know, I grew up in poverty. My parents were on a janitorial business, and life was tough growing up. It wasn't easy. There was times where the food was tight, and there's times when my parents couldn't afford to pay taxes, and we were in a bad position. And there was a lot of different. I remember coming home one day, and my family telling me we're gonna have to get rid of my animals because we can't afford them anymore. Um, and so you have this paradigm that you create for yourself. I was a high school dropout. At 18 years old, I was poor. I was a dropout, you know, and I was, doing everything besides drugs at that time, doing everything I possibly can do wrong, stealing and just being totally dishonest, and I hate to say it, but attaching myself to the culture that I was in. Um, and that to me could have been my defining moment. But I'm a big believer in being a paradigm breaker, and so that's why I went to school. You know, that's why I earned 5 college degrees. That's why I have a PhD, because I didn't want to let being a high school dropout define who I was. I also didn't want to be. Didn't want to be poor. I don't think anybody wants to be poor. So I did everything in my power to juggle that, my desire, with what God's desire is, and ultimately doing something significant. Opening a company from nothing. How many people are founders for a company and grow it from me to 230 people? So for me, it's been a lot about paradigm breaking, and it's not for my glory. It's not for me. It's for Jesus Christ, because I want people to look at me and my life and say, here is a guy that was really messed up. He was a drug addict. He's a high school dropout. He had, numerous different things. And he chose not to go down that road. But why? Why would he give, when we talk about the tithing as a company, why would he just give money away? Why would his company just give money away? And the only conclusion I want people to come to is because I love Jesus. And that's it. I don't try to set up an expectation where I have no expectations. That's his money. It's not my money. In fact, the 10% we put in a fund to the National Christian Foundation. And most of the time, I'm not even involved in where the money goes just because I, I don't really care as long as the message that Jesus Christ is number one in my life is what it is. And it's not just to the people we give to, but it's to my staff. They can see me doing the right thing and giving, and maybe it changes their life in one shape or form. And I've seen it. We've had people, not everybody in our company is a Christian. Obviously, that's a lot of people but we do practice Christian values. I tell everybody we pray before every meeting. We interwove our some of our values and things that are important to us to our company. We have a Bible study once a week online. Um, you know, uh, People don't have to participate, but it's there, and it's an important fact, kind of living out your life a little bit, and how you do things. But um, so that's really what it's been about me. It's been about showing God's glory through this paradigm breaking that fortunately has happened in my life. So I don't deserve or never thought I would be in the position that I am today. Who would ever thought they had 4 kids? But there's a lot of different ways. I've had an opportunity to do a lot of good things in people's lives, and that's all that you can really take away from here. It's like I helped bring some people to Jesus, and that's great. That's what I think you're called to do once you're saved.
Yeah, and I love that you're so humble about everything, because it would be very easy for a leader that has built what you have built to say, look at me, look what I've done. Because I think that's something that happens a lot today in society. When things are rough, they're like, God help me, whether it be building a company or whether it be overcoming an addiction or starting a new career or whatever it is, they seek the help. And then when it gets good, they're like, look what I've done, and that faith starts to play less of a role in it. So what are some things that you do to keep yourself grounded in your faith to ensure that doesn't happen and that your North Star, if you will, remains Christ?
And that's a tough one, and that's something that especially as men, we struggle with. And I'm a serious type A. So like me and my daughter are like, when you look at like the different personality types, you have extrovert and introvert. Introvert is 1, extreme extrovert is 10, and both me and my daughter are 10. So that's a tough thing because by nature I want to be the one out there talking, the front man. I want those things. I have that desire, but I eventually got to a point where I realized, but why? Why is that important to me? And it's because I was trying to be important in this world. And when you take away, hey, that's even a factor, what helped me tremendously is realizing that I have never done anything by myself. I have never accomplished anything by myself. So, number one, Jesus Christ, more importantly, he's been there. He's given me, the abilities to do different things. He's given me the perseverance to push through these things. He's given me the hope, which that word right there, the hope to that of tomorrow, because this life is tough, so that's number one. Number two is thinking, okay, well, my wife raised these children while I was, out there working till 10 o'clock at night. So there's help right there. And then you go down the litany of people like, okay, what about this leader who poured into me, you know? And by doing that, you really create the sense of humility, realizing that it's nothing that you did. The only thing that I can really say that I ever done was just pray the prayer to Jesus that, and this is a tough one, is that God, I don't know what you want to do with my life, but I accept your will, whatever that may be, and I'm going to go down that road and I'm going to put my best foot forward. And that's tough because when I built U.S. embassies, I went to Africa several different times, and I don't want to go back to Africa. I mean, America's a great place, so I'm kind of scared of what God's will may be. But That's okay, because I may be fearful, but that's not going to prevent me from walking through that door. So that's where I get it from more. The humility is just, you know, and if you really model your leadership style off the way Jesus Christ led, people stick to you. You know, I mean, people, when you ask, if you ask people in my company, my staff, what is the one reason that you're here? I mean, obviously everyone has to work. They got to pay the bills, right? Do their thing. But why are you really here? You could work anywhere. And it always comes down to culture. And whether we joke around, which we do a lot of, whether we do crazy things, like, you know, we do a talent show every August where everybody gets to do a talent, whether that's playing a guitar, or my talent is I do stunts. So 2 years ago, I jumped a go-kart on a 10 foot over a ramp with a Evil Knievel suit on, because that's what Jesus would want, you know? And then this past year, I actually bought, one of the guys had a Jeep Patriot and his transmission was going out. So, you know, so I offered him some money because he didn't want to trade in, and I offered him what they offered to trade in. So he gave it to me but I knew I was going to do something with it. I wasn't exactly sure. We have a gun range every year, and I thought, you know what? I'll take it out there and we'll blow it up, which sounds awesome, right? I mean, it still ran, it was fine. But then I thought, we did the talent show. I'm like, well, you know what? I need to do something. And I thought, what if I jumped that Jeep? So actually, I built, in the parking lot of our building, I built a dirt ramp and I jumped this Jeep probably 25 feet in the air. I mean, 25 feet long and about 5, 6 feet in the air. And I'm not saying Jesus does that, but fear is different when you have God in your life. Talking about leadership, I was going back to the point that through humility, you're willing to do things that will win the support of your people. Like, if you ask my people, anybody on my staff to come do something for me, whether it's on time, off time, they'll do it. And the reason they'll do it is because I believe they have respect for, you know, for the faith I have. Um, you know, not about me, but they have the respect for the faith that I have given. And uh, I don't know where we were. I kind of zigzagged around everywhere, so I apologize.
No, that's okay, because that's good stuff. And it's something that I would absolutely agree. When you have a culture in place with a company, and the employees buy into it, then you're off to the races.
Absolutely.
And so if you ask them to do something in the off hours, if they know that the culture is there and you'll make it up to them somehow, then they're like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. You know, if it helps you and helps the company, then they're all for it. And so I love that you have that kind of culture. And I absolutely think Jesus would jump a truck 25 in the air, because, you know, it meets people where they are, right? That's what he
Well, you
did.
know, that's what it is. You gotta meet people where they are at. So you wouldn't believe the positive response I got from something like that. And I got a call from one of my other CEO buddies. He got So, you know, when you do these things, of course, everybody has a camera today. So they
Right.
take a whole bunch of videos, and he called me and he goes, "Just explain this to me. Why?" And I was like, well, I don't know. But I also think this is something I think a lot of Christians don't get, is I do think Jesus wants you to be joyful.
Hmm.
And it seems like, you know, when you go to church, and I grew up in Catholic religion, so it was very, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Structured.
Yeah, very structured, and you know, everyone felt like in order to pray, you know, you got to be very formal about everything, um and then you realize it doesn't have to be that way. And once you realize that, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, you can do things that normal people can't do, you know? Like, we have a company chef, and I do that for my staff. So every time we have a meeting or whatever, we cook for them, or, you know, we get together once a month and we have like an eat out with chili cook off or something different. It's all those little things that really make the difference. And you can only do that if you're successful. And we've been fortunate enough to be successful. You know, we've been on Inc. 5,000 4 years in a row. Of the 5,000 fastest growing companies. Um, I've had the honor of being a finalist for Entrepreneur of the Year. Didn't win it, but hey, but no, that's okay. I mean, um, uh, good humility once again. Take you up, but then tear you back down a little bit. But anyhow, like I said, I don't know where we were.
That's okay. So, for the veteran, the entrepreneur, the parent listening who feels overwhelmed by pressure or adversity, what's one principle from your journey that they can apply today to move forward in not only purpose, but their faith?
And that is really a question I wrestle with every single day. I mean, really, because my goal is to bring people to Jesus. The vision for our company is we're in the business of building the kingdom. Has nothing to do with consulting, but it's why we do everything that we do. So by kind of being guided by that, that principle helps us tremendously. My advice would be simply be this: is that what do you have to fear? You have Jesus Christ on your side. And I simply point to numerous different parables in the Bible, different stories in the Bible. And you think of I always like to think of King David and how when he was a child, and everybody knows the story of him being a child and challenging Goliath, and people thought he was crazy. Here's this little kid. They say Goliath was. They believe he was nearly 9 foot tall. But can you imagine you're a little boy and this guy comes up on you and you're supposed to fight this guy, and you laugh at him, and David laughed at him and said, "Who are you to fight me? I have the Lord Jesus Christ on my side." And that's the kind of thing that I don't know if that makes you tingle inside or not, but it should. That's what inspires me, and that's what makes me do that's what makes me not fearful, is because I got the Lord Jesus Christ with me, and regardless of the outcome, it's gonna be what he wanted to be. So I can either take joy in it or I could not, and, I mean, he's done some great things with some bad situations, and if you don't believe me, go read the Bible. There's a lot of so that's my advice more than anything. It's just, you know, you have the Lord Jesus Christ behind you. What do you have to fear? So be joyful, pray always, and live your life for Him. And if you do those things, eh, all the other pieces fit together. They really do.
Good advice. Well, Scott, I know if people are like me and they've listened to this episode, and even now as we're recording, they're going, okay, where can I find out more about Scott? Where can I find out more about Ace? Because this sounds like an amazing company to work for. Where can they get more information?
ace-consulting.net. So just go Google that. You can friend me on LinkedIn, and if that's good, excuse me, link me on LinkedIn, not friends. So not much of a social media guy, but and I also have a few books on Amazon. Actually, I have my first book. It's called "Pick Up Your Mat and Walk." It's a story of success through adversity. It's not about me, but it has some of my life lessons in there, some of the things that have happened to me. Uh, Good book, and what I encourage people to get and give to their high school, uh, their high school child, because it has a lot of great principles in there. And the second book I have is called A Formula for Success. Another good book, and it just talks about, okay, if you want to be successful, how do you get there? And it's a step by step kind of guide there, and once again, lessons that I have learned through my journey through life. So I'd encourage you to read those, and you can learn more about my company and about me as a person.
Awesome. And if you were like, wait, what did he say? Then I'll have those links down in the show notes for you. Scott will provide them, and I'll put them there so you can find them easily when you're done listening to the episode today. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on to Unmasked and sharing some of your story. I know we probably just scratched the surface, but thank you for sharing your story and being so open and unmasked with the Unmasked community today.
Well, thank you for what you do, 'cause this is an important thing, getting God's message out through mediums like the podcast.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and all the glory to him. Well, thanks for joining me today on Unmasked. And again, huge thanks to Scott for being my guest and sharing so openly and honestly. If something in this episode spoke to you, don't let it stop with you. Share it with one person that God put on your heart while you were listening. You never know whose breakthrough might start with a simple message from you. If you want more encouragement, or want to work with me one-on-one, or are interested in having me speak at your church or event, you can find everything about me at wesleyfarnsworth.com. And make sure you join the Unmasked community by connecting with me on social media so that we can keep walking this journey together. Until next time, remember that grace is greater than your past, and real freedom begins the moment that you choose to live unmasked. God bless you.